philosophy of the archetypical hero's myth, which is basically one descends into the underworld, you go where you least want to look, you face the dragon goddess of chaos, you fight with all you have and a little more, and if you survive, you retrieve something of supreme value and you escort it back into the daylight.
Mm-hmm. And then you share it with everyone else.
And then you share it, yeah.
Which is a crucial part, crucial part of it.
Yeah, definitely. So, the second point, the logos is your premier instrument. You describe the logos as the capacity to articulate undifferentiated chaos
into the habitable order that is good. One of the things I came to understand when I was reanalyzing the earliest chapter in Genesis is that there's this idea in Genesis that the creative force, God, uses this process, employs this process, the logos, to extract habitable order from chaotic potential.
He speaks the world into being.
Right, but he uses the logos specifically to do it. Then the logos is truthful speech.
Yeah.
And so there's an idea there, which is that it's a deep idea. It's the deepest idea of the West, I would say. And it's the deepest religious idea. There's a way to bring order into being that makes the order good, and that's to bring it into being by spoken truths. You can extract new being out of potential by lying. But
that's
then,
not good.
No, it's hellish.
Yeah.
Tyrannical order, generally speaking. Well, and we know that to be the case.
Yeah.
It's not like this is some metaphysical speculation. If you read Solzhenitsyn, for example, or Viktor Frankl, people like that, who've deeply meditated on the relationship between malevolence and tyranny, I mean, they just lay it out clearly.
Yeah.
In a true tyranny, everyone lies about everything all the time.
Yeah.
And that's why it's hell. And that's exactly right.
You said that in the Soviet Union, in Eastern Germany, 1 in 3 people was a government informer.
Yeah, that's right.
That's insane.
It's the very definition of social pathology.
Yeah.
Because, well, if you can't say what you think, then you don't know who you are. You can't live.
Yeah.
You have to live as a crippled person, a self-crippling person. It's like you're taking a sledgehammer to your shins. You know, it's you and everyone else, and it's brutal and murderous.
One of the things that's so profound about the concept of the logos, because you refer to Genesis, but actually it's older, it's Babylonian, right? It's from the Enuma Elish.
Well, it's older. It's even older than that, right? I mean, it's as old as humanity itself, the central process by which human beings flourish in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's as old as higher consciousness is. The individual has sovereignty in the West. We have a rule here, a meta rule. The individual is not above the rules. It's not that. It's that the rules encounter a boundary where they hit the individual. So that even if you're a murderer, even if everyone knows you did it, say, you still have to be treated with the dignity that you would grant to someone who possesses the capacity to conquer chaos and revitalize tyrannical order.
Yeah.
The law itself has to draw to a halt in front of that. People don't understand how amazing it is that that principle ever emerged, because the impulsive, correct response to the revelation of a murderer in your midst is to just kill him as brutally and rapidly as possible. And you think, well, why not? He deserves it. It's like, well, you could make a case that he deserves it. And you can make a strong case for that, especially if you happen to be the relative of the victim, let's say.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The point is that there's something even deeper at stake that's real. And I believe that respect for that logos, let's say, which is something that's a co-creator of being and also something that is possessed of free will, those are the ideas. That without that respect, you cannot establish a harmonious relationship with yourself, because you don't know who you are. You cannot establish a real friendship or intimate relationship with anyone else. You can't be a good parent. You can't take your place in your local community, and you can't be a productive, useful citizen. When your relationships are working, whether they're with yourself or with one or many people, if they're working to the degree that they're guided by that principle. Well, it's simple in some ways. It's like, well, you and I want to get along. The first question, the last question even, is, well, do we trust each other? You know, and we test each other out constantly. It's like, well, you know, maybe I want to see if I can rely on you a little bit. So I tell you something that's a little rough, something I need a little help with maybe. I reveal something about myself, and I watch. And then maybe you have some sense and you listen, and you reveal something about yourself that's about the same magnitude. And we sit and think, okay, that went all right, that exchange was fair. And then maybe I think, okay, well, let's just push this a little bit farther. So I lay another card on the table and you do the same. And it's like, well, soon we find out that there's reciprocity, so we're tracking the exchanges, and that we can each be relied upon. It's like, great, well, I can rely on you. Well, good, now we can go off and try something difficult together. And that binds us together even more tightly.
In my understanding, the logos is just the capacity to articulate chaos into order.
But that's what we're doing when we're mediating in the space
all right.
between us. The potential is that we just met.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you don't know me, I don't know you, so what's going to come of this?
Yeah.
Well, many potential things. Well, and one of the things that's really struck me is that people know this, and I talk to people, I say, well, your parents are going to say to you, people who love you will say, you're not living up to your potential. And if they're serious about that, then that strikes at your heart. You think, oh my God, I'm not living up to my potential. That's like the ultimate sin. There's part of you that knows that. You think, well, I should be like making more of myself. I should be living up to my potential. And you never stop and sit back and think, what is this potential that we're referring to? What do we mean by that potential? And what sort of reality does it have? Well, it's only potential. What sort of reality does it have? It has no reality. It's only potential. Well, it's a weird, well, maybe it's a category. Maybe that's the best I can do on the spur of the moment. We all act as if potential is real and that it can be transformed by our choices.
Yeah. When people say to me, hey, you're not living up to your potential, they're actually saying you're not articulating order from chaos as you could.
Yes, or the corollary is that you're also not standing up to tyranny, like, you're not recasting tyrannical order like you should be.
Yeah.
It's both of those.
Yeah. So there's chaos on the one side and tyrannical order on the other.
Yeah, exactly.
And the logos mediates between them.
Yes, and so sometimes, and you see this in the story of Christ quite clearly, because first, especially in the extended version, let's say, where Christ is also the logos that exists at the beginning of time, it's like, well, that's the word that brings forth order from chaos, but the incarnate Christ, let's say, the logos made flesh, that's a way of looking at it, has a social revolutionary element to him. So he's standing up constantly against the Pharisees and the lawyers, right, the forces of tyranny. And so he's more in the actual passion story. He's more of a combater of corrupt order than someone who's calling forth order from chaos. That's the more abstract level. But both of them are integrally part of the hero story. The hero's always doing one of those two things.
So when you think about the logos, is this the element that makes the individual possess a certain divinity in your?
Yeah, it's indistinguishable from the divinity of the individual. It's the same thing. It's the divine principle of the individual. Yeah. And then one question might be, well, you could say, well, what's the phenomenological status of that? Which would be, how do you experience that? And you experience that in many ways. You experience that as a sense of meaning when you're doing something meaningful, so that's a direct experience of it. You can experience it in a more metaphysical way, and people experience that when they experience feelings of the infinite, intimations of the infinite, intimations of immortality. That's another way of thinking about it. And those can happen when you're listening to music. They can happen in sexual encounters. There's all sorts of rituals that might evoke them. That micro examples occur when you're working and you're deeply engaged in what you're doing and you're finding it meaningful. You can make contact with the part of you that seems infinite in scope. And those are the sorts of experiences that people usually refer to as mystical. Yeah. The evidence suggests that mystical experiences have a profoundly positive effect on all aspects of people's lives. Okay, so that's the phenomenological level. You can experience these things, and people have strived to experience them throughout human history. I mean, almost all the things we do that are cultural, like deeply cultural, all our forms, let's say, of entertainment, which is a very bad way of thinking about it, are attempts to produce those intimations of the divine. Yeah. And people love that more than anything, and no wonder. You couldn't say, well, that doesn't mean that there's any such thing as divine. It's like, well, that's a whole different argument.
So what I really enjoyed, I actually thoroughly enjoy it in my day-to-day life, when I started to articulate the concept of the logos for myself. Every morning when I wake up, I think, hey, I have a logos, and I can start to create order out of something chaotic.
Right.
I can start to explore territory and bring it into my map of the world.
That's right. There's chaos to encounter and giants to fight.
Yeah, it's quite fun.
Yes, absolutely. It's more fun than anything else.
Yeah, I know.
It's better than fun.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's so remarkable.
How would you call it if not fun?
Meaningful.
Meaningful.
It's meaningful, man. And it's better. And the reason to distinguish it from fun is that fun doesn't work when you're not having fun. Yeah. Fun doesn't work when you have people in your family that are suffering or when you're in a crisis. That's not fun. Yeah. But this works then too, maybe even better. So that's, it's a boat that doesn't sink in a storm. Yeah. It's an adventure. That's the other thing. It's an adventure. So, or maybe it's even the adventure. You wake up in the morning and you think, exactly that. There are dragons to slay and giants to fight.